Welcome to this explainer. You know, spending over 30 years in risk management and actuarial science teaches you one undeniable, absolute truth. Human beings are just completely terrible at assessing the finality of their own wins and losses. Seriously, we spend our entire lives blindly chasing positive variances and running totally terrified from downside risks. But what if the way we model those two concepts is fundamentally flawed? Well, today, we're going to meticulously unpack a profoundly monumental 18-word sentence and put it through the ultimate stress test. It's a framework that completely challenges how we forecast our lives, shifting our focus entirely away from that mythical ultimate finish line and pointing us directly back to continuous risk mitigation. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this text and see how its three core clauses actually form a complete, actuarially sound worldview. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. I mean, it reads beautifully, right? Almost like poetry. But beneath that rhythm lies a highly structured, rigorous equation for risk and endurance. The author has basically given us two negative boundaries, defining exactly what success and failure are not, and followed them up with one powerful affirmative constant.
So why do we do this? Why do we treat success and failure as absolute endpoints? From the time we're little kids in school all the way up to the peaks of our professional careers, we are heavily conditioned to view these states as permanent destinations on our timeline. We constantly calculate our lives by thinking, man, if I just get this promotion, I'm insulated from risk forever. Or on the flip side, if this project tanks, I am permanently, totally ruined. But this new framework, it forces us to stop and question our deeply ingrained habit of treating passing volatility as the actual end of the road.
Okay, moving into Section 1, the illusion of success and breaking the finality.
Consider the true dictionary definition of final, leaving nothing else to be done or altered. When you think about it, that is a completely static condition, and any seasoned risk assessor will tell you straight up, in the human experience, that static condition simply does not exist. No way. When we achieve something great, the world doesn't just stop spinning, the market changes, entirely new variables arise, and yesterday's big victory very quickly becomes the absolute baseline for tomorrow's expectations. So by denying the word final, this model just rips away the illusion that we can ever permanently hedge against tomorrow by relying entirely on yesterday's realized gain. By explicitly severing the semantic connection between the concept of success and the concept of finality, we reveal a really profound truth. Victory is just a passing milestone. It's never a true resting place. Success is merely the realization of a specific, immediate aim. It's not the ultimate, unchangeable end of your life's model. Detaching success from finality frees us from the impossible, frankly statistically doomed pressure of maintaining a perfect winning streak. It helps us wake up and realize there is always a newly calculated day after the big win. Which brings us right to Section 2, the myth of failure and surviving the fall. Failure is not fatal. Which is 4 simple syllables, this philosophy fundamentally recalculates the perceived stakes of our setbacks and our mistakes. Look, in the middle of a massive personal or professional collapse, our brains immediately trigger an intense survival response, right? We perceive a totally manageable downside risk as ultimate catastrophic ruin. We literally feel like the game is completely over. But this short, punchy clause acts as a much-needed intellectual override to that biological panic. Because by rejecting the absolute finality of the word fatal, we're compelled to view failure as just temporary volatility rather than total destruction. I mean, true fatality is a disastrous outcome from which there is absolutely no recovery, a scenario where the probability of future action literally hits zero. But unless a setback actually ends your life, there is almost always a recovery curve. This framework demands we stop catastrophizing our mistakes and start recognizing that failure is simply harsh data. It's rarely a terminal event. And this brilliantly illustrates the separation between an adverse event actually happening and our assumption of permanent ruin. The event is just the failure. It's the lost contract, the failed exam, the rejected manuscript. That's it. The outcome of fatality, however, that's merely a psychological projection we are placing onto that event. By breaking the causal link between the two, we actually give ourselves permission to absorb a loss without bankrupting our identity or our entire future in the process. All right, let's hit Section 3. The engine of courage and the active state. We usually map our lives on a strictly linear timeline. We start an endeavor, we hit a milestone of success or failure, and then we reach what we intuitively expect to be a definitive end. But any seasoned analyst knows the end is almost always false. Because success isn't final and failure isn't fatal, the timeline doesn't actually stop at that second step. Instead, it introduces a continuous, infinite reality where you literally have to wake up and calculate your next move, entirely regardless of yesterday's yield.
Now, courage here isn't being positioned as some grand, movie-style battlefield bravery. Not at all. It is the quiet, resilient stamina required simply to endure the timeline. It's the daily risk tolerance to withstand the difficulty of a failure, or even the fear of trying to replicate a past success. It's the everyday mental and moral perseverance to just keep putting one foot in front of the other, especially when the upcoming variables are completely unknown.
It is the courage to continue. This specific phrasing is a game changer because it shifts our focus entirely away from the passive outcomes of winning or losing. Think about it. You cannot do a success, and you cannot do a failure. Those are external variances that just happen to you. But continue? That is an active, ongoing verb. It requires constant, deliberate effort. This model forces us to realize that the action is where our true, absolute agency lies.
And finally, Section 4. What truly counts and the continuous cycle.
Notice how these 3 steps create this beautiful, ongoing mechanism. Life isn't a straight line ending in victory or defeat. It's an infinite loop powered entirely by the transition from milestone to continuation. You experience the milestone, you summon the courage, and you continue the journey. And then what? The cycle resets. You experience the next milestone, and you step forward all over again. This is the continuous underwriting of your life. It is the absolute heartbeat of resilience.
Which brings us to the final, profound contrast of this entire philosophy. We spend decades, literally decades of our lives obsessing over external outcomes. Did I succeed or did I fail? But those external variables don't actually count because they are inherently subject to market volatility that is entirely outside of our control. What counts is the internal action. The inward choice to persevere holds the only lasting value. Because the courage to take the next step is literally the single metric we have total agency over.
So I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder today. If you truly internalize this framework, if you accept the statistical reality that your latest win isn't the finish line and your latest loss isn't actual ruin, then what is actually stopping you from taking the next step? The answer is usually just our own flawed risk perception. Keep this continuous cycle in mind as you navigate your own timeline. And remember, in the infinite game of life, the only real victory is simply having the courage to continue.